let's talk about the internal experience of a dismissive avoidant. So I know everybody loves to hate on the dismissive avoidant, and I do tell people if they're in the dating stages of a relationship and they start to recognize that maybe they're with a DA partner, they should run. And that's because they just don't have the skills and they haven't done the work yet to show up well in a relationship. But a lot of my clients are actually in long-term relationships or they're married with children. And so they're already just now recognizing that they're with a DA. And because they're committed and they've built a life together, they need to stay and do the work. And DAs can change, they can show up, they can do the work. So the only reason I say that you would run is in the very beginning, because why start with something that's already broken? If they've already done their work or they're working on it, it's a little bit different. So Leslie Wells, connection coach here. I help individuals in their romantic relationships by looking at things through an attachment lens, helping them understand their own attachment style, and then being able to show up well for their partner by also understanding what speaks to their partner and their partner's attachment style. I'm going to sort of do this dynamic from the assumption that we have a dismissive avoidant with a fearful avoidant, because so often fearful avoidants end up with a DA. And that's my own personal experience is that most of my clients in practice are either two FAs together or an FA with a DA. My own personal experience with my husband, we've been together for 16 years, is that I was a fearful avoidant leaning very anxious, and he was a fearful avoidant at one time leaning very, very dismissive. And so there's a lot of similarities there that we see with an FA and a DA. So the first thing about the DA is they have on blinders. They do not have the ability to really self-reflect and dig into their behaviors or why they're doing their behaviors. They're sort of completely unaware. And what they do believe about themselves does not necessarily line up with what you see in their actions or lack thereof. So for the dismissive avoidant, they very much think, and I deal with a lot of men who are dismissive avoidants naturally, society and their parents will sort of create that blueprint from them when they're young children. But the men are very open and very transparent about these things with me. And my husband has told me the same experience for him back before we started doing our work. And so I know this to be true. I've had a lot of clients say it. But their internal experience is they think they're usually an okay person. They work hard. They participate in hobbies, which they believe is healthy. They don't mind lending a helping hand to other people. They show up for other people. In fact, one of the complaints a lot of times about DAs is they show up for everybody else, but they don't show up for me. Well, that's because it's the romantic relationships and the actual committed relationships that trigger them. So they believe they're pretty much a good person. When a conflict is brought to them, they think they're doing the right thing because they shy away from emotions, they naturally show up in ways where they want to fix, they want to take action. And in their mind, that's how they're supposed to show up to get you out of these big feelings, because big feelings mean that something is terribly wrong and they've got to be suppressed, shoved away, like gone. Because as a child, that is what they experienced. So remember, as a child, no one was emotionally attuned to them as far as their caregivers or parents. They didn't experience that. So when they had big emotions, they were shut down, corrected, criticized. They were basically taught that emotions are bad. And so big emotions bring forth for them lots of shame. So when you're having very big emotions, they were taught as a child that they needed to suppress those emotions, put them away, and handle that on their own. So when you bring them big emotions or a need with a lot of reactivity or a lot of emotion, they want to do the same thing as their parents did for them. They want to quickly help you resolve that, tuck those emotions away, put them away so that you can be healthy. And that feels safest to them. And so they think in conflict that by trying to show up in a way of fixing things or telling you it's not so bad or giving you like a cliche thing to sort of move past it, they think that they're doing the right thing and they're a good person. And they actually think that you're the one who's maybe not showing up well, especially if you're coming as an FA with a lot of reactivity, character attacks, or you're being ugly and you're in a fight response. They actually look at that situation and they're like, A, you're the one who's really weak right now because your emotions are controlling you. And B, like you're showing up really ugly right now. Well, I'm shutting down, withdrawing, but I'm not saying ugly, hurtful things, and I'm not making the situation worse and escalating it. So their perception is very, very different than someone else looking in from the outside. They also think that they feel safest with peace and harmony. And so they think that peace and harmony is a good thing. They think if I can keep her happy, if I can please her, if I can kind of keep everything status quo, this is a good thing. They don't understand that that means that there's a lack of emotional intimacy there, right? You have to actually resolve conflict to get emotionally closer and actually know one another. But for them, they're being a good person by keeping the peace and not upsetting you, which is why they will not come back to conflict. They view conflict as as being a negative thing and as harming the relationship, and they're trying not to harm the relationship. The other thing that you really, really have to remember is they were never modeled what emotional attunement looks like. So if I said to you today, go out and build me an airplane, and you had no idea what that looked like and you've never been exposed to it, you're going to be frozen and paralyzed with like, what do I do? Where do I start? So for them, because no one ever built those connections for them, those neural connections that showed them how to be emotionally attuned to others, they're not emotionally attuned to themselves. They do not recognize cues for attention, bids for attention, for connection, and they don't recognize emotional needs. They don't even recognize it within them, their own selves. And so they're constantly missing these cues for connection and where they should step in for you emotionally and where you're emotionally struggling. They are not wired to recognize it. They don't recognize it within their own self. So what happens is you bring them a need, you bring them a problem, and you show up with any amount of criticism, they're instantly going to feel like, oh my gosh, I'm defective. I missed this. This person is saying this, like I should clearly know what I did wrong and that I should know how to fix it, and I don't. And a lot of FAs their expectations around repair and how to help them with their pain are so unrealistic. Even if the DA tries, they really get to this place where they want them to do exactly a certain thing, exactly the same way. It's got to be very specific verbiage. It's like this list of things that they need to do to help with the FA's pain, when the FA has to learn to not hold on to their pain, to not get stuck in it, to work on the rumination. They have to learn their own self-soothing tools. The DA cannot completely do it for an FA. But the DA is like, oh my gosh, not only do I recognize that I do not know how to do this, that I have stepped into territory where I'm defective here. I don't know what to do. I'm completely at a loss. Everything that I do try to do is making it worse for this person. So they shut down and withdraw. Of course, at that point, their partner feels abandoned, rejected, and they're hurting worse. And then a lot of times they'll escalate. And then the DA is like, wow, I really don't know what to do here. So they quit trying. They feel defective. So what happens is when we make somebody feel criticized, or they recognize or feel that they are not capable or competent in an area, with that carries a lot of shame, which is exactly what they experienced in childhood when their families or their parents or whoever was their caregiver criticized them, shamed them, or made them feel bad for their emotions. They go back to that same fight, that same trauma response of, flee or freeze, because that's what worked as a child. Because a child they do not inherently know what to do with massive amounts of shame from their caregiver or feelings. And so they go back to that childhood strategy of shut down, withdraw, self-soothe, and cope that way. So whenever you come to a DA and they feel like they're not going to get it right, they don't know how to show up, they recognize that their emotional intelligence is not existent, so they're afraid to make a move because they know that any move they make is probably going to be wrong, then comes in shame. And with shame comes hiding. When people feel shame, they typically run and hide. They are already an attachment style who is not able to self-reflect and actually process their emotions. And because shame is one of the most dysregulating emotions, they are not going to be able to stay in that space. They are going to go into a trauma response, which is why it is so absolutely critical that if a DA is actually trying to do their work, that you give them grace, that you give them room to grow, that you come at them in a non-critical way, and that you allow them to be vulnerable without pushing them. So there's a lot of things that you can do on your end to help them, because this is their internal perception. You do not have to walk on eggshells. You do not have to baby them. You do not have to handhold them. But if you are in a committed, loving relationship, and this is your partner, somebody that you want to spend the rest of your life with, you would want to show up in a way that does not trigger them, cause them trauma, or make things in the relationship worse and end up in negative cycles. It's the same thing with a parent and child. If your child is emotionally struggling, you're going to want to help them through that. I recognize that your partner is not a child, but you still want to nurture and care, protect and provide, and do all of the things for your partner that you would do in any good, healthy relationship, even in a friendship. When you love someone, you care enough to show up in ways that speak to them. It's that simple. So what you would just have to remember is that the DA has a completely different perception of themselves, and they are really thinking that they are a good person doing the good things and not trying to hurt you and trying to do the right things. So hopefully that showed some light for you what's going on internally with the dismissive avoidant.